It's that time of year. If you haven't already, you're probably going to be starting to do this really soon, and that is topping off your beds for spring. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about 3 huge mistakes you don't want to make when topping off your beds for spring. They can not only cost you dearly, but could also potentially just end up wasting a ton of money. Let's go. When we first filled these beds up, they were right up to the top. And if you've grown and raised beds before, you know that soil has this mysterious ability just to disappear. I've said before that there's like an evil soil fairy that comes and just steals 25% of your bed. Where does it go? It just completely disappears. Now, the more truthful answer is it just doesn't disappear, it actually compacts. Now, compaction is a very common process that happens when material breaks down. If you start with a bunch of wood chips, in 2 or 3 years, you'll ask yourself, where'd the wood chips go? Well, it's because they degrade and they break down, and that increases their surface area as they break down, and then eventually they just become part of the overall soil. And that's actually why it takes so long to build topsoil. You know, some people say it takes up to 100 years to build 1 inch of topsoil. And I believe it, because if I'm not bringing in just piles and piles and piles of organic material, and I'm relying just on what I have around me to build up my soil, it's going to take a tremendous amount of time, probably about 100 years to build up 1 inch. But what's really nice is in raised beds, I can build up that soil just like that. And I throw in all that beautiful soil, and then it continues to break down, it continues to degrade, and continues to collapse in on itself. And rather than just continually filling in your bed, what you're essentially doing is over time, you're actually collapsing the soil to the point where it becomes compacted. Yes, I did say compacted. And I know a lot of you know that compacted soil is not good. And so one of the first mistakes that we do as gardeners is we continue to apply compost. We continue to apply topsoil or any type of soil into our raised beds with zero expectation of ever, maybe not the first year, maybe not the second year, but ever actually fluffing our soil. Now, I'm a huge advocate of no-till. I think not tilling your soil is great, but one thing that happens in no-till, as I'll show you, is over time, if we keep adding on 3 inches this year, 3 inches next year, 3 inches the year after that, what the result is the very bottom of the soil just continues to get more and more and more and more compressed to the point where root penetration becomes very challenging, and you're ultimately going to have a lot of aeration problems. Maybe not drainage, it'll probably drain just fine. Texture is going to be great, but it's going to be so small and so compressed that the roots are going to have a hard time really being encouraged to go down that far. And so by every once in a while, flipping or fluffing your soil, I'll show you how we do it. And it's not every year, but we flip and fluff our soil about every 2 or 3 years just to add not only more organic material, but to turn some of that really degraded soil down at the bottom up to the top. And it helps to kind of aerate and fluff our soil so it's not just layer on top of layer on top of layer on top of layer until the end of time. So as we begin to dig into our bed here, the first thing we notice is the top is really loose. It's wonderful. As we get down deeper, we start to notice it begins to become a little more compacted. And if I am to actually look here, so the first top little bit, very loose. Bottom little bit, I actually kind of have to scrape at it a little bit to break some soil off. At the very bottom of the bed here, if I get down to the bottom, I'm actually really scraping. And I notice it cakes onto my fingers because the texture is just so fine and so broken down that the quality's great. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's wonderful attributes. But the problem is that roots like loose soil. They're not encouraged to go down into compacted soil. And over time, as soil degrades, it breaks down compost, organic material, right? It breaks that down into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces until it just becomes kind of a little silty. And that just breaks it down, and not even really silty, but just it breaks it down into the tiniest form possible to the point where there's really nothing left to break down smaller. And so as a gardener, what I will do is I will bring in some fresh soil to kind of top it up, but I also take my shovel and give it a little flip and a plop. Now I am turning the soil, yes, I am, but it's because I'm turning that really degraded stuff into the fresher mix. And I only do this about every 2 to 3 years. And it's just because in my experience, I find that the root penetration over the course of 2 or 3 years the roots are encouraged less and less and less to go down deep into the soil when there's so much compaction happening. So that's the first mistake, is just not flipping your beds ever and just constantly topping them off. The second mistake the gardeners make when topping off their beds is presuming that they have to top it off with soil. Now, I know you're probably confused by that, because it's like, okay, well, what else would I top my bed off with? Oh, he's talking about compost, or oh, he's talking about... No, I'm not even talking about any form of compost or topsoil or anything. You don't need to top off your bed with fresh soil all the time when the soil quality is incredible. What you can do is you can actually do what's called trench composting. This actually not only builds the volume of the bed up, but it also breaks down slowly into organic material your plants can use. It's not only going to help to hold on to water, but it's also going to help plant roots to obtain nutrients that otherwise would have had to be brought in by you. So your soil's great. Your soil texture is awesome, right? Well, what do? Okay, just take your shovel, dig yourself a little bit of a trench here, 8-10 inches deep. Take some food scraps, take some aged chicken manure, take some rabbit poop. I saw some laying around here somewhere. I don't see, there's some rabbit poop around here. Take some rabbit poop, take some old stems, some old plant material, chuck those into the trench. Just chuck them in. Chuck them in just like that. 8-10 inches deep. We do this in the fall with pumpkins. We'll get pumpkins on the side of the road. Throw the pumpkins right into the trench. Old plant material, leaves, stems. I know you're thinking, Luke, what about crop rotation? Are you worried? No, I'm not. We have tons of videos on why crop rotation and repurposing things like tomato plants, pepper plants, squash plants, right? We're so paranoid about encouraging powdery mildew or tomato blight into our garden. It was already in there to begin with. It's a soil-borne fungus. It comes from the soil, gets on your plants, which are the host. From there, it turns into spores, spreads throughout the air, and where does it go? Into the soil. It was always in your soil to begin with. Unless we're living in a completely sterile environment on Mars, you're going to have it. You're absolutely going to have it. And so by filling this trench up with material, what are we not filling it up with? Soil. That means the soil that came from the trench can now sit on top of the plant material. It's going to break down slowly over time, and this allows us to actually fill up our bed. It allows us to fill up our bed. I only used a little bit of it, but I could, in theory, do a ton of it, do my whole bed. And that's going to add volume to my bed that, yes, will break down, but it doesn't have to be in the form of heavy bags of compost. It doesn't have to be in the form of expensive bags of compost. It can be using the good quality soil that we have and organic material that's laying around. Now, I want to be really clear. The next question you're going to ask is, isn't that going to break down and rob nitrogen from the soil? It can. It definitely can. But we always make an effort to apply a good all-purpose fertilizer. We also make an effort to, when we're using our trench composting, we're not composting just brown material. You can use leaves, you can certainly use twigs, you can certainly use logs and things like that. I would not use wood chips. Why would I not use wood chips? Wood chips are going to, because the surface area is so large, they're going to break down very fast and rob nitrogen from the soil. Leaves, on the other hand, like fall leaves do contain a lot of nitrogen, but they mat and they compress. They actually don't have a lot of surface area. If they were shredded, if those leaves were shredded up, they're gonna break down, but they're gonna rob nitrogen from the soil. And until they're completely broken down, they're not gonna release that nitrogen. So I try to trench compost with things like food scraps, things that have nitrogen already in them, or I like to add stuff like with our potatoes, we'll add alfalfa pellets. Super high source of nitrogen, great organic material source, and it overall is going to give volume to the bed while preventing robbing nitrogen from the soil, and it's going to give back to the earthworms and your plants. It's awesome. And the third mistake, and this is probably the biggest mistake I see gardeners making when topping off their beds for spring, and that is assuming that they have to go with compost. This is going to be a hot take. I'm definitely going to read it in the comment section. I do every time I talk about this. It's not necessarily the most important thing in the world to use compost. Is it the best? In my opinion, yes. But if you don't have access to compost, if you don't have access to really high quality compost, bagged compost at the store is not only very expensive, but it's sometimes no better off than topsoil is. Now, quality does matter, absolutely. Can you fill up your beds with clay? Wouldn't recommend it, but it's all in how you amend. You see, the thing is, our beds can start with pure compost, but if you grow in pure compost for 3 or 4 years and you don't amend, if you don't re-amend your soil, it's no better than topsoil is. It's going to be void of nutrients and void of life. As it begins to break down and degrade, like we talked about in point 1, it also loses nutrients due to leaching. And so this pile of topsoil we have behind us here, it is dark. It is really beautiful stuff. But we wouldn't use it on its own. We're going to amend. We're going to amend with less compost, or we might amend with an all-purpose fertilizer. We're going to amend with maybe some gypsum to loosen it up. You can use what you have on hand. You know, there's plenty of people for quite literally millennia that have grown in clay soil. Look at gardens down south that are dark red clay. Well, growing in clay would seem like the worst thing in the world, but it's how they amend it. They amend it by breaking it down with gypsum, they break it down with compost, they break it down with manure, they break it down with smaller inputs that overall add to a greater result, which is that it allows them to use what they have, and it unlocks some really great benefits that come from topsoil, that come from clay. And so you don't have to go with compost. Even here on the farm, we fill up our raised beds with mostly compost, but compost is very expensive. And so what we'll do is we'll fill up our beds with, let's say, 50 to 75% of this really good quality, nothing wrong with it topsoil. How I know is it came from when we scraped the pond. We had all these piles of topsoil here are from when we actually did the earthwork. Where the barn was, we scraped that because there's a barn sitting on top of it. Might as well use it. Where we had the pond, well, there's water there now. So now there's topsoil. And so everywhere we scraped, we actually just had them pile up the topsoil. It's great stuff. It's really great. It's wonderful, wonderful soil. Is it wonderful long-term? No, but it's how we amend it. And so oftentimes I feel like gardeners are so black or white. It's like it either has to be compost or no garden at all. Compost is by far the best, but it's also by far the hardest to come by and the most expensive, unless you make it yourself, which we have lots of videos on how to do that. But I think a lot of people just get discouraged because it's like, oh, I don't have compost, my garden's gonna suck. No, you have plenty of resources that you can use to top off your beds, but you have to learn how to amend those things that might be slightly less high quality, right? You can save a little bit of money by going with a really high quality topsoil. And topsoil is what? Broken down compost. That's right. Oh my gosh, you guys are so smart. How'd you know that? It's almost like I talked about it in the first point. But yeah, that's what it is. Topsoil is just broken down organic material. It just keeps breaking down. So it's going to have a lot of those benefits that compost once had. Just it loses a lot of the porosity, a lot of the sponginess. So that's what we just want to bring those qualities back with a little bit of fresh compost. You don't need to fill up your whole bed with compost. So those are 3 critical mistakes that I see gardeners making when they're topping off their beds. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. And I really do hope that you have fun in your garden this year. That's what it's all about. We're just having fun. We're having fun. We're growing plants, getting fresh air, getting some sunshine. And that's what I'm all about, at least. So as always, this is Luke from the My Gardener channel. Reminding you to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll catch you all on the next episode. Grow bigger, everybody. See ya. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting mygardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care. Bye.